Assalamualaikum, Jamil. How are you doing? Jamil, we will start in like 5 minutes time. Let's see if somebody else joins as well. Hi, Jamil, Rashad. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
All right, I guess I have to wait right now. So I think we should start because you guys are like, we are just two guys right now. Maybe Aman, my boy is not like kind of joining any sooner right now. So let's just get started because domain is a little bit large in size and they contain number of different topics which are large numbers. So we cannot wait long on that. So let's start with domain 7. It's second last domain of CISSP course outline. Not very much large, but considerably large enough to cover like 4 or 5 hours. So that's why I think we should really jump in soon on that. So, uh, well, this domain is mainly comprised of two main sections. The first section would be about operations security, roles and responsibilities, and practices that are followed in operations security department. The second aspect is related to physical security a little bit, as I told you, like in domain 3 when I was talking about physical security. I reminded you about that. Well, there are two parts of physical security part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is about facility security that was covered in domain 3, and this part would cover a little bit about interzone and inside the facility security controls like doors, lock systems, surveillance systems like CCTV cameras, or maybe intrusion detection systems like motion detectors, things like that. These are two main topics that we'll be discussing in this domain. Apart from that, we will be discussing one main topic is forensics, forensic investigations. How do these investigations are carried out, and what are different techniques and types of investigations that are carried out? What are the things that the investigator has to worry about when they are trying to collect an evidence for a particular kind of investigation? Different type of evidence that we have to worry about, and which type of investigation demands which level severity of evidence for a particular kind of investigation. And then you will conclude our this domain on the types of evidences that would have, and that's something that's it for this kind of domain. So let's get started with this domain. So as I told you, this domain is security operations domain. So it would mostly be talking about the responsibilities of people who are working in security operations department. So operations security department has multiple responsibilities. One of the main responsibility that we already are aware of is that they actually keep things running smoothly as they could. Right. Want to put someone in because he was waiting in the queue list. So I was talking about that the operation security department role is that we should the guys working in this department, they should keep the things running smoothly as they are running. But there is a hidden responsibility, or maybe you can say there's always overlooked responsibility of a security operations department, and that is to provide legal cover to the organization. And the legal cover in litigation terms is that the actions of the organization is compared with the actions of a prudent man. A prudent man is a person who is very cautious, who is very careful, and who does the decision what's right for the organization. So when the criminal when there are investigations that are carried out, when there are some lawsuits that are being filed against the organization, and something bad happens, so in that case, the organization actions are compared with the actions of that prudent man move. So this is something called which as prudent man move. We already discussed this in domain 1, but I'm just giving you a little bit a kind of like review on that. So these two kind of acts are being compared and checked out that whether the organization acted prudently or not, and then on that basis, maybe organization is either wins the case or it loses the case. So in all, the thing is that the organization has to uh, follow the due care and due diligence rule very strictly. The due diligence rule is like we have to investigate the things what's right to do inside the organization. Like as we know that well, we need to carry out risk management inside the organization to find out what are the possible risks. When we have found out what are the possible risks, this is called as due diligence. And after that, we have to respond to those risks. And for responding those risks, we implement some kind of controls. We either accept the risks with a certain kind of reasons, or we either respond by mitigation, or we transfer those risks based on our risk appetite. So this practice is called as due care. So in all summary, we say that, well, organization has to follow due care and due diligence inside the security operations department, which is the hidden role of the operation security department. Second aspect of the operations department is administrative management. Administrative management is about the activities that are going on inside the operations department. Are they being properly managed in a manner that is required for the streamlined processes of operation security department? This include, I guess, let me check if they have. Yep, it has uh, these different 8 different administrative responsibilities that the management has to make sure that they are being properly implemented inside the operations security operations department. So first thing is separation of duties that are properly being implemented. We need to make sure that, well, each person has assigned the amount of responsibility or credentials that is necessary to carry out his job, right? So there's, as we mentioned in security and risk management, the main one that, well, security operation separation of duty is basically implemented so that we could avoid the frauds happening inside the organization. Like, say for example, if one person is being responsible for 2 3 different kinds of tasks inside the organization, so it's very easy for him to carry out some malicious or maybe some kind of adverse incident inside the organization, which maybe organization might not be able to detect on time. Maybe after some time, maybe investigation happens, somebody will uncover that. But at that time, maybe a crime could be, like, they could be carried out if one person is doing job critical jobs, 2 or 3 different kinds of critical jobs. So it's highly recommended that we need to ensure the separation of duty rule has been followed. We should ensure that, well, there are proper roles which are defined, like the security engineer has to do the job of, like, there are, like, security engineer is kind of like, we always find out that, well, they are being found out implementing security controls inside the organization, like deployment of firewalls, IPS ID systems, or identity access management systems. But the specifics about it is that, well, sometimes we find that the admin guy or the system administrator or network administrator has the access to same kind of controls that security engineer has. So we need to make sure that, well, the network engineer should have the role defined, which has access to the resources that is necessary to carry out his job, and that job is to make network up and running. So in specific and practically, you can see that, well, the network administrator should have access to router switches and some low level networking devices which are capable to actually give you enough credentials to carry out the availability job inside the organization. And the security engineer is actually responsible to find out what are threats, how do different threats are being mitigated through different kinds of controls that are deployed, like IPS ideas, identity access management solutions, or firewalls. So this role has to be separate from network administrator. So this is something like we should worry about that. Well, the separation of duties roles, separation of duty rule should be implemented in terms of roles. So next is, we need to make sure that need to know access is being implemented while we are carrying out, we are designing these roles. Since there's something that was already discussed, and in domain 5 as well, that we need to make sure that need to know and least privileges is being taken into consideration when we are designing roles. Need to know is like, say for example, if there are 2 different guys who are taking access to certain shared resource. So if we want to give an access to a resource, we should need to make sure that, well, is it really necessary to carry out his job? Like, if is it included in his job role that he needs to know about this information? Like, if, for example, if there's a Windows server and that server has, say for example, networking. capabilities enabled on it, and it has also some applications installed on it, like maybe application 1, 2, and 3. So maybe this guy should this guy know about application 2 and 3 apart from application 1, which is necessary to carry out his job. So we should only give him information about application 1 only, not application 2 and 3. This is called as need to know. Well, he is on the same system, but he would only have knowledge about using and manipulating the application 1 capabilities and functions, not 2 and 3. And the least privilege is that how much credentials are being given to that particular individual to carry out its job function. Like if you have like read privileges to certain kind of data, so or maybe you have login credentials through which you can access and generate certain kind of reports from that particular system that in which you have access on application 1. So need to know and least privileges, they have to be properly taken care of and considered while designing the roles. We need to make sure 2% control is also being followed out. Again, it's already discussed in domain 1 as well. Skills knowledge is also being discussed, job rotation, mandatory rotation. 2% control is still, it's a kind of a revision again. We need to make sure that there are some critical roles, critical functions. That function has been split into two different people who are important personalities inside the organization or the department. And these guys should be available with their split knowledge to carry out the critical function. Split knowledge is again part of it. 2% control split knowledge is like maybe like you have password which is broken up into two parts. Key escrow is one example of that, which is practical example, but I'm just giving you a simplified example of that. There's a password there is a password which is being set for a particular kind of function, and that password is being split up into two different parts, and each part is being shared between a particular party. Like maybe a guy, maybe engineer 1 knows, sorry, the engineer 1, maybe so manager 1 knows password part 1, and manager 2 knows password part 2. So it's a particular function going to be carried out if these two guys are available at the time, like 2% control, and apart from that, these two passwords should be entered at the same time to carry out that function. Job rotation is about fraud detection. It's also be taken care of when we are actually designing operation security operations department roles and responsibilities, in which we need to make sure that one job should not be done permanently by one employee at all times inside the organization. There should be job rotation that should be followed along. It's not like that. Well, like most of the time, it follows like if the organization, if the employee was working in, say for example, in department 1 and he switched over to department 2, but it's a different separate talk. It's about like we are just running short of manpower, but it's like we are working in a particular given environment. And now the thing is that there are certain kind of functions that this department performs, like there are function 1, 2, and 3. And function 1 is, say for example, data entry. Function 2 is about generating reports, and function 3 is about doing analysis. So these three functions, like they are divided into three different employees. We need to make sure that the people who are enacted to follow those three functions, they are switched in their job responsibilities. And the reason being that if somebody does something wrong in one role, and someone who is coming in the next shift, he will figure it out and find out that something is odd with this data that's being entered by a previous employee. So he will definitely report this back to the manager. So this is the main reason, to find out frauds, to find out some insider threats. It could happen like maybe 2 or 3 guys who actually end up like come together and make up a plan and maybe do some kind of malicious activity. Scarlet pollution is already discussed in domain 1, but it is like the role of manager is to make sure that these roles are separate, they are being properly monitored. If the activity has to happen, it will happen. But the thing is that if your forensic processes and your investigation is tough enough to actually carry out and find out who was responsible for for this kind of incident in your organization. Mandatory vacation, again, same kind of reason, and same reason is that we need to uh, we need to ensure that mandatory leave policy is in their organization and it's being properly followed up. Like that, taking the example of these three again guys in the operations security department, we need to make sure that each guy takes mandatory leaves. Like mostly it's 1 month in a year time, or maybe 20 days. So we need to make sure that every guy takes this leave. And the reason being that when the guy is off from this department or this organization, he won't have any access. His account would be suspended for some period of time, and his responsibilities might be done by someone else. Maybe the two other employees left out are inside the department. These guys might be taking additional charge of taking the responsibilities of the guy who is on the leave. So this would again disclose these hidden insider threats inside the organization in a way that somebody who is doing wrong, or he is trying to maybe send some amount, or maybe he is doing some kind of fraud inside the accounting things. So that could be well disclosed at that point if he goes around on vacations. Clipping levels should also be defined, and this is I guess we discussed this in domain 5 a little bit. Let me define it a little bit. Clipping levels are defined in two different contexts. In domain 5, it was defined on the account brute forcing thing. It happens that sometimes we do is that we try to brute force an account by trying to figure out or break the password by password spraying and cracking stuff. So we try a number of different passwords to crack the password, and the passwords eventually break. It's not like they will not be broken, but it depends like how much length is the password. Mostly people like 7-character password, 8-9 character password that is breakable in a day period of time. Not much of that, not much of a deal of that with the normal system. About that, it would take maybe months, weeks, even hundreds of years. It depends on length and complexity. So the thing is that most of the time, to avoid this kind of attack, we do throttling. We define that 3 or 5 wrong password attempts are allowed, and after that, the account will be locked. So there is another thing inside it, and that's about we set a threshold on logging as well. Like if somebody happens to enter 3 different wrong password attempts on an account, so we set a threshold on that, and we say that about 3 password attempts, all the attempts should be logged onto the system, and it should sent to the centralized logging server. This is called as threshold level or clipping levels. So clipping level is all about when we set a condition to monitor or alert, like if there are a set number of incidents observed, like maybe 50 incidents being happened, and on the 51st incident, the alert will go to the response team. And response team will respond back adequately on the type of incident criticality of the phone. More on that in the incident management slide. But the thing is that responder will find out that something bad is happening, try investigating on this stuff. All right, insurance levels. About insurance levels, we had a little talk on in domain. Yes, it was domain 3, in which we saw evaluation assurance level, ITSEC and TSEC, which tells us about how good is the product. Now the thing is, how do we know if the given product is trustworthy enough or not? Like, will it be able to perform the level of security functionality that we are expecting it to perform, and will it survive in environment, or will it survive in the organization production environment or organization operations environment? in a way we are expecting it to behave in our environment. So there are a number of certifications that are being rewarded to products. But all in all, all these certifications, as I told you, this ITSEC, TSEC, and this EL, they actually fall under two different categories. That is operational insurance and life cycle insurance. So operational insurance is all about like will the product will provide necessary level of protections based on like what kind of architecture it will represent to us inside the organization, how its deployment, how what kind of deployment it represents in the organization, what are the different embedded features inside it, functionality provided by the product. And on the side of security, we should make sure that does it provide educate access control, educate auditing and monitoring features. Like we need to make sure that it represents or it generates proper amount or suitable amount of logs that are necessary to monitor the device itself. We need to make sure that the device do not have any covert channels inside it. Covert channels we discussed in domain 3. It was about like we do not use the normal traditional channels or paths to do the communication between the two entities, and this path is hidden from the normal channel. We just discussed two kinds of covert channels: the time-based channel and the storage-based channel in domain 3. So we need to make sure that the covert channel is properly being checked out, that there's no covert channel inside it. Well, most of the products that we have in our environment, they are not being checked this way. And we just blindly trust the vendors on that. So like vendors always tell us that this is the product, we don't have any background on that. But it's like we should have our own testing mechanisms in place. So the product should have no covert channels in it. We should ensure that trust recovery procedures are properly being implemented inside the product. More on that next slide. What's trust recovery? So life cycle insurance is another aspect which we have to worry about this product we are trying to implement inside the organization. And life cycle insurance is all about evaluating the product from the design specification point of view. We need to make sure that the product has necessary clipping levels, configuration options available to us. Like as I told you that if there are some thresholds that we can define for certain set of logs or maybe authentication attempts, or maybe some incidents happening in the organization, and we find out that these incidents just cross certain threshold. And these threshold, once the threshold has been crossed, we should have some kind of alerting mechanism in place to monitor those things. We should know that the product that we are trying to buy or utilize in our environment, it should have gone through proper testing mechanisms. Mostly unit testing and integration testing is part of that. We discussed this in domain 6, security assessment testing. Unit testing is testing the individual components of the software and like the individual modules. Right? And integration testing is about how do this module interact with each other and share the information which are required. Like sometimes the module will need an input from another module, or sometimes the module will output its information to another module. So this is something which is called as integration testing. Well, it was like software integration testing. There was two main other testing types which are discussed in integration testing, which is like hardware integration testing and interface testing as well. So we have to make sure that the unit testing and integration testing is being properly passed by this product in the vendor environment. We have also to make sure that the product that is arrived at our doorstep, it's being passed through secure distribution channels as well. We have to make sure that the product that's being it's transported securely to our premises. It's like sometimes vendors say that the product we have a product development cycle such that we do not make all the parts in our under one roof. We make the main components of the product, and then we have some suppliers, and these suppliers actually do the rest of the stuff like finishing stuff or maybe adding additional components inside the product. So we send our product to the third parties, and these third parties will kind of add additional components like the product. And sometimes the organization vendor processes are such that well, these products are shifted to some central warehouse, and from their point onwards, these are delivered to their customers. So this is the kind of like supply chain of vendors they like follow along. So we need to make sure that well the supply chain is also secure. And once the product is arrived at our doorstep, it should pass through strict inspection procedures of our organization. We need to make sure that these inspection procedures properly uh, um, scrutinize the product before they go ahead to the product to be deployed inside their environment. All right, now on trusted recovery. As I told you, we will be talking about that. So here we go. Trusted recovery uh, is a mechanism in which we want to ensure that system never goes into an unsecure state when it's in the process of booting or is shutting down, or it's actually changing. Generally we can say that we should ensure that well the system does not leave the secure state when it's trying to change the state, like if it's shutting down or if it's restarting or it's just going through some kind of a fault, or it's kind of like throwing out some kind of errors. Need to make sure in each and every state the system has to be secure. One clearance over here. The system does not mean a computer hardware or an operating system. A system is generally any function that we are doing inside our organization. So this function could be a software function, this could be a hardware function, or it could be a combination of both. But the generic term is being utilized over here, which is system. So system has to ensure that it's secure whenever it tries to change its state. So there could be different ways in which the state of the system could be changed. It could be like the system might be rebooting, or maybe system is is going through some emergency restart, or maybe it's cooled booting or cold starting. So there could be multiple reasons why the system is going through these all phases. If the system is rebooting, uh, talking about the adverse sides of these conditions, not the normal type side, like somebody is came in and just they restarted the system. So it's like it could be intentional, it could be unintentional. It depends, like if the employee is trained, or if he is in being informed, or if he's a new guy, or he is a person from a vendor's company, and he doesn't know about your environment, and he just restarted the system without getting any consent from the local customer. But very rare, but it happens. So the system either reboots. So in certain aspects, like in case of adverse events, what happens is if system is rebooting, there could be multiple kinds of different negative reasons for that. It could be because of insufficient memory, like sometimes the system is overwhelmed with too many processes that it cannot carry out its normal business with normal operating procedures. So that would actually happen to result in system crash. So it could also be because of some invalid data or data structures. Remember, like early 1995 days, if you know, there was one pink of death attack, vulnerability inside the ping stack itself, the IPv4 stack itself. If you send a ping packet that has a size larger than 65535 length, and any system receiving the packet with the size larger than 65535, it would not be able to handle this packet properly, which come under the invalid data structure or data values. So the system would crash and start, like it would kind of like go into hard state. So it's kind of one practical example of that, early 1995 days. So this is one reason for rebooting. Emergency restarts could be because of like it could be possible that there may be some low privilege process. It's trying to access a high privilege process. A cold start could be maybe like sometime the system is like booting, like something system is being booting from the like from the initializing, it's an initializing phase. So we have to make sure that well the system when it's initializing, it does not go inadvertently into some state which is insecure in nature. And all in all, in all the three conditions, we have to have some kind of mechanisms in place, and these mechanisms are to be carried out, like these are to be make sure that well the system whenever it's going through these states, these mechanisms has to be ensured for the system that is uh, under close scrutiny. So the thing is that whenever the system is booting, we need to make sure that no changes are made to the boot sequence. This is for the reason that well, uh, there was one incident in which it happens that if you take control of the system somehow, we are not talking about how did you take control of the system, social engineering, just code or exploits, whatever. Once you take control of the system, what you can do is you can replace the kernel of yours of the acquired system. So if you can just change the kernel of the acquired system, you might have two different kernels on the system. So you can change the boot sequence to just boot from your malformed, or maybe sorry, your malicious kernel, and not the running or the running, or maybe the good state kernel. So sometimes what happens in the system when it boots up, it would actually boot up in an insecure state, and that's because that well the adversaries have pointed in their own malicious kernel inside your operating system, so inside your system. So we need to make sure that well the system uh, should not change the boot sequence. One other thing is that we need to make sure that when system is initializing, uh, it should initialize in a single user or safe mode, right? So this is what something that we need to make sure that well it should be locally accessible. It should not enter directly into privileged processes until administrator logs into the single user mode and then initiate the process of enhancing it to run the multi-user mode, and then running other privileged processes onto it. So there should be some admin intervention required over there. About the display, uh, uh, most of the time the displays are in technical terms we call it as consoles. uh, like when the system is booting, we have console coming up on screen. So most of the time it happens that well the consoles have three different displays. Display one is in, say for example, department one, display two is in the operations room, display three is inside data center. So these displays are actually done through the mechanism called as KVM, keyboard video mouse. This system is give you the ability of actually replicating and giving you display over a longer distances. These console displays, like if you want to see how the system is booting, so you can make use of this KVM, say without going directly inside the data center. You can just sit on your chair and just on your chair, and you can find out what's happening on the console through the use of KVM. Not going much more detail into KVM how it works, but it's just a way in which we can utilize this thing inside of our environment to actually shoot. But we have to make sure that well these outputs are not reflected. These outputs are not reflected uh, to some other locations when the system is booting. So if it's booting and somebody else is also seeing the display that you are seeing it, so maybe they could have information about uh, whereabouts, about like what's happening in the system right now. We need to make sure that well the separation of duty concept is implemented. We need to make sure that well whenever the system is in crash mode, it reboots, it has to go into secure state, and then secure state is to fix the issues and then come back in a proper manner. And we have to make sure that well the proper files and directories which are necessary for the operation of the system, they are in place, and they are not being modified. Like sometimes we need to make sure that well if the system is being accessed by some low privileged guy, we need to make sure that this guy should not do some modifications of logs or files to the system. So least privilege principle is again they should be followed onto the system. So more on this system part, we should also control the input and output produced by the system. So inputs, in terms of inputs, we have to make sure that the input that is being taken by the system, it's being properly validated first. Input validation is we will talk about this in domain 8 as well, but in application security. But we make sure that well the malformed input is not being sent, fuzz input is not being sent, some malicious entities are being sent. Again, the discussion is going into SQL injection attacks and cross-site scripting attacks and some information disclosure attacks. So it's about we have to validate it properly. We discussed this part in domain 6 as well a little bit. We should make sure that when the transactions which are sent, which are being sent to the system, or sorry, accepted by the system, it should be atomic in nature. And that means that well that each instruction that's being, or each input that's being accepted by the system itself, it should be independently accepted, or it should be rejected as a whole. It should not be accepted partially. Like if I'm sending ABC, and if the system does not accept ABC, and it accepts just B and C. So it should just accept ABC as a whole or reject ABC as a whole. It shouldn't accept BC or just A or just AB. It should reject the whole keyword as a whole. It should not accept the partial input. So we should make sure about that. So the transaction should be atomic. We should make sure that when input is being given to the system, it should be properly logged and timestamped so that when someone entered some information, again it goes to the thing of accountability auditing and and monitoring stuff. We have to make sure that all the things that are present inside this system, like binaries, DLLs, libraries, they need to make sure that these things that make up the system as a whole, these should be properly signed with the authorized vendor. Like we have signed codes from those vendors. Like it's kind of a separate big discussion on like there is a signed code and unsigned code and trusted code and untrusted code that's present inside it. Just a general view that whenever you try to install Windows and you have some general standard drivers from the Windows themselves, and sometimes you install the drivers from third-party devices. So the third-party devices are normally not being properly signed because they don't have these branding capabilities, or sometimes they don't have these certificate capabilities to bind the certificate with their code or their drivers. So this Windows that you install on your system, it has default drivers installed, and they're all signed by Microsoft themselves, right? So they are signed drivers. Right? That's why sometimes when you run a code or an application or a driver on your system, it kind of sometimes prompts you on saying that well the device driver is not trusted on this operating system. So that's the main reason that well it's not being signed by Microsoft, or it's not signed by someone who is trusted. So whenever you are entering something, it should be properly being validated, it should be properly being executed on DLLs and libraries and executables which are trusted by the vendor, or which are trusted by the principle through which you are using their services. Regarding the output, so now when you have taken the input from one module maybe, or one system maybe, or maybe a user themselves, and now we want to process the output, and once you have processed the input, you will generate an output, and this output has some other characteristics that you have to make sure that they bear in it before they are being represented to the internet parties. So this output that the system will generate, you have to make sure that the output is properly uh, it should be properly, its integrity should be properly maintained. and we could make use of certain techniques to do that. Techniques we discussed in domain 3 that we can use hashing techniques. We can use message authentication code to make sure that the output generated is uh, is properly hashed to 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 ensure its integrity. We have to make sure that uh, the output that's generated, it should be it should have proper classification levels. Like the information that's generated, it should represent the classification level and the entire audience, which is defined or which is being taken out by figuring out what's the classification level of the information that's generated by the system. So proper classification labeling should be also taken care of on that. Uh, One more thing is that sometimes what happens is that so, we are logging something and we generate reports of those logs or this working functionality of this system. We get reports. Sometimes the report is full, sometimes the report is empty. Sometimes when the report is empty, we think that, well, the report is empty, there is nothing to monitor, we just ignore the report. We keep on doing that, but we don't know on the back end side. Sometimes it would happen that, well, the intruder has access to the system, so they intend to disable the logs onto this logging onto the system itself. So when you have the logging disabled, no reports will be generated. So it should be properly being practiced that even if no output is generated, no reports are being generated, it should be properly logged. It should be properly reported to the intended audience to make sure that, well, the reports are not being generated, so that if there is some investigation that has to be generated or maybe started, it should be properly started at the very beginning. Okay, so uh, about uh, operations department, one other aspect that we mostly discuss is the, the inventories. Operations security department or operations department is also being responsible to maintain the inventory of the system of the assets inside the organization. What are the different kinds of assets that are present inside the organization? And these inventories could be in many different forms. We need to have this information with us because we need to know what to protect, what are the different information systems and assets in our organization, which asset has what kind of importance in our organization, kind of like asset valuation, which was discussed in domain two. It was about classification, that we have to do classification based on criticality and sensitivity, and then we have to evaluate the assets. So we have to have the operations security department should have information available at their disposal about what are the all the available assets inside the organization. So this could be hardware assets, it could be software assets. So once they have the list of those all assets, they should know about which asset is more important to the organization. So that's the main reason why we are here, and we should make an inventory of these assets. This inventory list is being made uh, like on a quarterly basis, whenever there is a change, whenever the new equipment has been bought. There's a inventory scan that is being run weekly on weekly basis to find out that if there is any new asset that's being arrived onto the network. Well, it's all about this is about if this is the discussion which is about larger networks, like thousands and thousands of different clients and systems that are inside the organizations, and we don't know about, we cannot track all of them, so we don't know in multiple offices at times. So we have different monitoring systems and available at our disposal that we can use to find out and track these assets inside the organization. So so these inventories could be tracked with different kinds of solutions. Hardware inventories have these RFID based solutions that are being utilized to find out they are actually capable of using the barcode based technology to read the asset tag and find out the asset information, like what is the kind of asset in it. But barcodes can be used to really hardcode multiple kinds of information inside the barcode, like the maybe asset tag, the asset ID, IP address, or the department name, location name, the facility, place, country name. So multiple kinds of things can be engraved into it, and we can just read it through some kind of RF readers. Software licensing is another part that we normally uh, uh, follow and practice around in operations security department, and that's about tracing all the softwares available inside our organization, and then finding out the licenses that are used inside the organization. So this is necessary to know about it, and there are multiple reasons for that. We have to also trace for our organization software assets that are not licensed and they are being used inside the organization. Something that I'm talking about, the pirated softwares. People inside the organization, they are crazy. Like they don't know about what security is. They just concentrate on the job and concentrate on what's necessary to amuse them. So they don't know a lot about security. Awareness is one thing that we use to actually bring them into notice that this is something that's part of your duty and it should be properly followed inside the organization. So we need to make sure that we have properly inventory of all the software assets. There are some solutions which are used for tracking those assets. One famous name in market is being used for SolarWinds, which have their inventory management solution. ManageAgent has their own solution. One famous solution is from Kaspersky. Kaspersky Enterprise has their inventory management solution with the antivirus itself. Uh, um, Semantic has its own dedicated suite of inventory management solution, which is called ITMS, which is from Altus itself. Previous organization was Altus who built this solution. Just a general information giving you out so that maybe if you are interested in this part of the section of the domain and to dig more around it, so you can just find out from here. So we can use these softwares to actually trace these softwares. We can find out where are these licenses being used. Sometimes what happens is that when the operations department, not the operations security, but operations department finds out some buys like maybe hundreds or 200s of those licenses, and they don't know about where they are being utilized. So these are under the custody of a single guy. So what this guy could do is that he is a friend of another guy who is in another organization who is very poor organization, cannot afford signing licenses. So maybe this guy would actually kind of like maybe either sell these licenses to the other guy in the organization, because he knows that these licenses are not being used for quite long period of time. It has been like 2 3 years and nobody has actually asked about it or used it. So I can easily just um, do the deal under the table to just call my friend and ask him that, why do you do this license and use it for some period of time? I don't care about if you use it for 1 year or 2 years. But one thing is that if I need this license, I will grab this from you without your notice. So it's something kind of like under the table. These most of the guys who are who are using these licenses, who has these licenses under their custody, they kind of do this kind of stuff at times. So you don't know about it. So there should be licensing tracing capability as well. So other aspect that I was talking about the tracing was that one thing is pirate software utilization inside the organization. So someone is installing some software that is cracked. Someone is installing the software that is being with the backdoor installed on it. So other ugly things like maybe someone is using the correct software in the organization and someone informs from inside the organization to the exact vendor asking for that. This organization is using unlicensed software. Why not just go having some investigation in it, and maybe maybe you can just register a lawsuit against this organization. So maybe this organization, so this vendor will come in and they will ask you about that. We have been informed by some of our resources that you have been using unlicensed product of ours in your side organization, and we have necessary authority to actually investigate it inside the organization. So in that case, maybe some lawsuits could result into this uh, kind of mishaps or mistakes if you do not properly track, like if there are some malicious and apart from that, malicious backdoors is another thing. You install a pirated application or pirated operating system that has a backdoor calling home to the command and control center, has a control of your system, can do number of different things with your system. Even if it's already inside your system, and your system is inside your organization. So maybe your organization is already compromised. You don't know. So we have to make sure we have proper inventory of assets inside your organization. All right, switching gears a little bit to physical security, as I showed you, second main part of this domain is physical security part two. So a little bit about physical security, as we discussed in domain three, it was about facility security practices, best practices that we have to follow. In this part, we only talk about inside the facility, some security measures that we have to take care of. So it's always being asked that security, physical security, or even security is always has to be layered. Well, it was like second or third slide in domain one, which I just told you guys that security should always be layered, and there was a, a diagram in which I demonstrated these 4 or 5 different circles, and I said the first circle should be about physical security, second circle should be about uh, intrusions, third circle should be about locks, fourth circle should be about logical access control, fifth security should be vaults and other stuff like that. Anybody any questions? I assume somebody was expecting to ask some question. All right. I'll continue if nobody has a question. All right. I was talking about that. Well, physical security should always, it should the security, it should always be there. In form of like we have like outdoor lighting, and then followed by we have some door locking mechanisms, then we have fencing, and then we have vaults as already discussed. So on top of that, maybe we can just diversify these controls a little bit more. Like maybe we can use unique keys for each kind of door. We can use facility operational models. Like say we can say that we have open hours security measures, and we have closed hours security measures. Like in open hours, we can say that well, the front door and the back door and the side doors, all of them are open for open public. But once the open hours are closed, open hours are like they are off now, like after 9 to 5. Uh, Only the front door could be used for accessing the facility, or maybe reduced traffic could be observed, or reduce like uh, kind of like human traffic could be observed on certain areas. Maybe you cannot park park on the side of the facility. You can just only park in front of the facility after off your hours. But it depends upon like what are the different rules and security procedures which are defined by physical security team. So one aspect of physical security is about locks that I already mentioned. That locks could be used in certain places to actually uh, to secure some assets. So in security point of view, these locks are not the ultimate prevention mechanisms. They are being used as delaying mechanisms. Like like these are like kind of like all the locks are breakable in a way. We will discuss this in coming slides. Like they are breakable, but one thing we should note that these are delay mechanisms, and while considering locking systems, we should also consider the surrounding areas as well, like the doors, hinges, surrounding environment. It's all about like, say for example, if you're using the toughest lock on a door, what would be the security of that environment if the door is made of wood and you can easily punch and make a hole inside the door. So you should make sure that the environment is also secure across the environment, across the asset that you're trying to secure. You should make sure if you're using a strong high grid lock at particular facility, you should also make sure the environment or surrounding that block is also secure, like the walls, material that is being used inside the walls. Maybe it's a concrete material and it's not made of wood, or it's not made of some soft material. Maybe the door should also be of high grade capability. So we have to just take care of that as well. So there are a number of different kinds of locks that could be utilized depend upon the kind of security measures we want to take. So there are like some of them are like warded locks, some kind of tumbler locks, uh, like wafer tumbler locks and other these kind of locks, and some are like programmable locks, preset kind of locks. So we have some slide on the number of types of locks. That's about warded locks and these tumbler locks. So warded locks are like uh, they have uh, they have kind of a padlock inside it, and then they have with a key that could be used like to to just open the lock themselves. And then we have tumbler locks, which come up under different categories like wafer tumbler lock, pin tumbler lock, or maybe lever tumbler lock. Wafer tumbler lock is like this kind of lock has wafer inside it, and there are no pins into it. Like you can see inside the picture, that upper locks are these are like wafer locks, and the lower picture, which is you can see that there's a key with some kind of a springs, and there are cylinders inside it. So there is no cylinder into it; they are just wafers. And the pin tunnel locks, which is given below over here, there are pins, as you can see over here. Let me just grab a laser. These are called cylinders. These are called springs, and this is whole big cylinder, right? So these are called pins, and this is called whole cylinder. This is a cylinder. Like this is circular in nature, and uh, it happened. These are like comparatively very easy to pick the locks. Like they are lock picking tools. Maybe traditional lock picking tools you can find out in the market very easily. Well, last year I just brought these lock-picking tools from AliExpress. They were quite amazing. I haven't tried that once, but they are quite well enough to actually break these cylindrical locks. I haven't tried that, but one day I will try it because I didn't get much time to actually research on it. But I'm still working on it to retrieve these locks. So, the cylindrical locks have this capability that this key is made in a particular sequence, that there are particular hinges and particular like there are grooves and there are ups and downs inside the key, and these they represent the type of pattern that is required to be made by the pin inside the cylinder. So if you figure out the sequence of these pins, you can easily break the lock. There are three different kinds of tools. I guess I have mentioned it. uh, Yeah, I have mentioned them. I'll come to that. I will discuss about how these tools are being used a little bit, but I think I won't be able to kind of like demonstrate that. So this section is, guys, important because let me tell you that. Well, I received a question on uh, uh, this one liver tumbler lock thing, which has a combination stream on it. The question was about that which kind of lock is most vulnerable to brute forcing attack. So there were very different kinds of options available to that, and I happened to choose the combination lock with a cylindrical mechanism built into it. So we can have question on that. So that's why I'm just discussing that. It's not like that it's just a useless stuff that's mentioned in the book. So they do give questions on these kind of technologies and these kind of mechanisms as well. So please do consider that. So I was talking about that these cylindrical locks, these are cylindrical which are easy to break. So as I was talking about the pin tumbler locks, which has a pin inside it, wafer tumbler lock which has disc, and lever tumbler lock which has a lever. Like um, mostly it's used for safes. These are like moving levers. Like sometimes, let me just make a pen. Should I get a pen? Yep. These lever tumbler locks are such that there is a lever which you have to move in this direction first, and then after that you have to move in upward direction, right? So once you do this like 2 times, and after that you would have to either enter a code or either enter a combination, and after that you can try out that, well, if the lab opens or not. But this is something which is called zero terminal log. This is something that I got in the exam. All right, combination lock. Combination lock, as the name says, well, there is a combination on it, and as they're spinning wheels, which actually kind of like give you the capability of rotating the keys onto the lock, and then you have to set the pattern in it. Cipher locks are again at places you can find out maybe some certain high class, maybe five-star, seven-star hotels. You can find out some secure rooms have these kind of via cipher locks as well, which can be used to secure certain areas. Well, these locks have different kinds of capabilities into it that well, I haven't mentioned about. The certain locks can do these what to call it, they have some kind of delaying mechanisms built into it, and that delaying mechanism is like, say for example, you have to enter the password and wait for a set period of time, and then you can just enter into the facility, or maybe you can say that these uh, locks can be open for a set period of time, like when you open the door for a longer period of time, then it's allowed to open it, then the alarm will be triggered. Sometimes when you open the door and you keep it open for like more than 1 minute, the alarm will be triggered and the response team will arrive or whatever. But there is some kind of like delay timeout that's being right over there, and there is a key write override mechanisms in there that's being mentioned in some blocks, and this key override mechanism is such that, well, say for example, some you are trying to to uh, kind of debit some amount from your ATM, and you enter into the ATM, and somebody came and forcefully entered into the ATM booth, and he just pointed the gun at your head and asked you to just tell you your password or just type in the password to get the amount. So what would you do is that, well, there are two kind of keys that you can get. One key which is a normal key that you can enter and you can just do the transactions. Another one is the kind of like it's a key which can override your previous password, right? So what can be done is that, well, if you enter the password, it will override your previous password, and then it will either lock your account, like maybe your account will be seized. You cannot touch the account, you cannot do the extractions. The password will work for just one time. And it will just, you can enter the amount whatever you want, or maybe there's a set amount which is set on the backend side that you can only extract, like when you enter the override key, it will give you only maybe 500 rupees or 100 rupees or 1000 rupees that you have set on the backend, and then after that the account will be locked. Nobody would be able to actually extract more amount from the ATM, um, apart from the value that you have mentioned. And there is a hostage alarms sometimes that's being set, like say for example the guy is pointing a gun at your point and asks you to just type the password and extract them out. So even sometimes what happens is that you you enter the hostage alarm code and not the normal code into the ATM machine. Like say for example 1234 was your normal password, and the hostage alarm is like tetra 9999. So what you can do is you can press 9999. So amount will be extracted, but apart from that, there will be a signal that would go to the emergency response team at that place. Well, it's not being followed over here. Um, but there are some ways in which we can inform this response team on that. So it mostly happens in high secure facility location with high volume transactions. So these are places in which you can use this stuff at places to find out, like if you want trying to secure something. So circumventing blocks, as already mentioned to you, there are three different tools that are being used to let me grab a pen. Yeah. Okay. So let me check. I guess it's not a pen. Yep. So there are three different kinds of tools that can be used to break the locks. One is the tension range lock. Well, when you buy the tools, you can get almost all three of tools inside the one package or in toolbox. All of them are in one box. It depends. Like sometimes the toolbox would contain just the two of these, and you will be just have to buy lock picking, lock bumping tool separately, but they have different purposes. As I told you, that cylindrical locks have their own tools, the wafer locks have their own tools, and the wheel kind of locks have their own tools that you can use. So each kind of tool is used for a particular kind of a condition. So the tension range tool is the easiest one you can try. It's a tool like this one, right? So there's an L-shaped tool, and this tool is used such that, well, as I told you, that there are certain patterns, right? So this is the pattern of the cylinder that you have to follow, right? If you know the pattern, like this cylinder has to be a little bit higher than the previous cylinder, and this cylinder has to be the lowest in the position from all the cylinders, sorry, or from all the pins, and then the final pin should be like it should be like equal to the cylinder position, sorry, the pin position, which is the position of the first pin. So you can easily just uh, like push these pins at certain locations, and you can like by experience you can actually judge that, well, this thing has happened, and you can just easily put the position proper location. And then when you have them in proper position, you can have a separate tool which is uh, it's kind of like little bit thinner than the L-shaped tool, but you can use this tool to actually rotate the cylinder, and the lock will be open. So to try this out, there are some dummy locks that are being made. Most of the time, some lock picking, this penetration testing guys, they actually do this kind of stuff as well. Physical penetration testing guys, I'm talking about those guys. So these guys have these transparent locks. Maybe you can find it out on the Google. You can just type in transparent lock for practicing, and you can find out that, well, you can easily see the pin's location along with the spring and the cylinder itself. And you can use this tool to actually adjust the position of the pins. Once you have enough experience with that, and then you can do the blind adjustment of those pins with other locks, like the one which you have already seen. So some locks are like they're easily prone to picking. Well, every lock that you see all around you, it's easy to pick. It's not big deal if you have the tools. Some guys actually, well, in movies we always see that, well, like these guys are using some kind of a pin, or maybe a small thin wire, to actually break into the hotel rooms in other stuff. Well, it's doable, but it requires a lot of practice. So first stage is that you do the transparent lock picking. Second stage is you do the blind lock picking, in which you won't be able to see the pins themselves. And the third stage is that then you can, if you are well enough to pick the cylindrical locks, then you try the wafer locks, and then you are good at that, then you can go start doing with pin stuff. But it requires a lot of effort. So the second thing is wrecking. Wrecking is like it's like it's a tool. It's kind of a kind of like it's a wire type of tool, and this tool is such that, well, it when you enter it inside the cylindrical lock system or any lock system, and you just immediately pull it out, it will put these keys inside the, and it puts the pin in a proper position. So you won't have to just like try it out by yourself. The lock picking bumping stuff work the same way, but the tool is a little bit different for that. So as I told you, these locks have different strengths, and these strengths are decided based on the type of grade they have. Grade 1 logs, grade 2 logs, grade 3 logs. Grade 1 logs are mostly they are common industrial logs that are being used. Grade 2 logs are used at heavy duty logs, which are used in residential like used residential areas, and some consumer locks which are used as grade 3 locks, and they have their differences in terms of lock picking capabilities in their cylinder quality, which is like low security, medium security, and high security. So there are some tags that are also mentioned on the locks if you are buying the lock from a well-known vendor. So you can even find out the pin code as well on site. The some vendors used to write this down, which is kind of a crack, right? Nobody knows about that. Well, these keys, these numbers have some meaning when they are being written on the key itself. But this numbering scheme is being used, is mostly understood by these lock breakers. Like normal key makers understand these lock keys numbers. So like if it's like 836, so it means that, well, the height of the first pin is 8 and the second pin is 3, and the third pin is 6. So it means that how much effort is required to actually break this lock or maybe make a key out of it. You can just replicate the keys by just finding out the number out of it. Like if you have seen the key, you have found out the number is 836 written on the key, so you can easily make a copy of that key by just knowing the number of the key. Some lock makers uh, actually write these numbers onto the keys. Well, it was for the betterment of this users, but I think for lock picking and for breaking into a pen testing, it's not a good stuff. Like maybe you can easily just figure out. For adversaries, it's easy stuff that if this just they have a glance of your key, they can have a look of it, and then they can make a key out of it. So some lockpickers do not, like they are not practicing it, like they don't mm, write the pin numbers onto the key themselves. And also there are great numbers that are mentioned, but if you are buying it from a very good vendor, so in that case you would have the type of category that would be already mentioned on that on the locks themselves. All right, so personal access controls. These are electronic devices that would ask people to authenticate before entering into certain facilities. And there are a number of ways in which we can authenticate and authorize people to gain access to the system. And obvious reasons we have discussed this in domain 5. We can use card reading devices like memory cards and smart cards. We can also make use of these biometric devices as well to authenticate an individual before gaining access, allowing access to the system. Mostly we can use two-factor authentication alongside biometric devices at times. There are certain kinds of threats that are being posed for these kind of authentication mechanisms, and that's piggybacking and tailgating. Tailgating is a kind of a sub form of piggybacking, but kind of a little bit different from it. Piggybacking means that uh, you are authenticating to a particular system or particular facility. You just have authenticated, authorized yourself, and there's a guy who is accompanying you along your journey to the place you're going to. So he is not actually entering here his credentials. Maybe he doesn't have his credentials, or maybe he has it but he's not using it. And he is walking side by you as you are going along and opening the doors through your credentials. So he is going along with you. So this is called as piggybacking, in which the guy, you know the guy who is actually walking by yourself. And the tailgating is a little bit different from that. Tailgating is such that, like, say, for example, you are walking and you are opening the doors along your way to go to the secure facility, but you do not know that somebody is following you from behind. And this guy actually like finding out the timeout period of the locking system that you are unlocking, and following along with these path you are following and going along the open doors without your notice. So tailgating is different in that way, that you don't have idea about it. Piggybacking, you have an idea because you just know that you are being social. You just not know about it that you are being social engineered. So these are two different kind of threats. So the solution to this kind of problems is that there should be the doors or these locking systems should be properly guarded with the presence of guards. And these guards can know that well somebody is authorized or is not authorized, and they can decide that well the guy is not authorized or not. Well, user awareness is other thing that we have to make sure to actually avoid the social engineering based attempts. Man traps are other thing that we use to prevent this kind of stuff. Man trap, as I guess I have mentioned, is in domain 5. It's a kind of I'm doing a top view of this room. This is a room, and this room gives you access to this facility, which is in this direction. This direction. Sorry. Let me just freeze there. All right. All right. All right. In this direction. So in this direction, you want to go in this direction. So there is a guard who sits here, and there is a door over here, and there is another door which leads to the exact facility that you want to go in. So the normal person will arrive and he will enter his credentials on this door, and these are credentials of type 1. It will enter and the door will open. The guy will get into this room, and this guy will be monitored by the guard, seeing it if it's an authorized guy or not, and then maybe on basis of that, maybe he will start monitoring him on authenticating to the other door as well. So he will enter credentials of type 1 on this door, and then he will have to enter a different kind of credentials on this door, and after that he will be authorized to go out of this door. So if you do not know the credentials of this door, what would happen is if you have entered the credentials, you have entered this door will automatically get closed. You cannot go back. This door will be closed. Now the only way is that you have to go out of this door if you know these credentials. If you do not know, you will be trapped inside this room, and that's why it's called as man trap. Right. The perimeter security part is it also contains fencing. So about fencing, we have to. These are also considered as delaying mechanisms. They are also used for crowd controls and public access controls, and they are also used in like different to mitigate different sorts of threats as well. Most of the time, these fences have some barbed wire wound or engraved onto it, and this barbed wire has some tilts, and this tilt sometimes decides the purpose of the security or purpose of the fencing security. If they are tilted inside the facility onto the fences, it means we are trying to keep people inside the facility. If they are tilted out, it means that we are trying to keep people out and not allowing them to enter inside the facility. So these barbed wire directions sometimes they are used for this like purposes to define the security purpose. One other thing about fencing is we decide about its height as well, like how high should be the fence, and there are different height levels like 3 to 4 feet if we are trying to avoid casual trespassers, or it could be 6 to 7 feet if we are trying to avoid like normal climbers, normal casual adversaries. Or if we are discussing serious business, then it should be above 8 foot of height. One more. Okay, so there is another thing that's being discussed is gauge. Yeah, the gauge is you can say it's the diameter of the wire making up the fins by itself. So if the gauge is of lower value, it means the wire making up the fence is thin. And if the gauge is of high diameter, so the high diameter, so it's kind of like more stiff and more strong and strengthy. So the gauge wire diameter decides the strength of the fence. There is another measurement that is used alongside the gauge, which is called as mesh. Let me try this down for you, maybe if it could uh, be clarified a little bit more for you guys. Okay, I was talking about gauge. So as I told you that a fence is made up of this mesh stuff, right? This kind of mesh is being made by the fence, and this wire, if we go a little bit closer to it, it has some kind of diameter, right? So what's the diameter of this wire? It's measured in gauges. Like this is the gauge, like 5 gauge, 2 gauge, 3 gauge, 2.5 gauge. This is the diameter that's being used. So if it's thicker, so it's mean if it's a big gauge, so it means the wire would be very thick. If it's small in size, so it means the wire will be very thin in size. So again, it depends about security, like what kind of security you're trying to design. The second thing is the mesh. The mesh is about the distance between the two wires. These two wires have some distance, right? So this distance is again defining about the mesh size, right? If it's small in value, it means the mesh is kind of complex. Nobody could be able to actually climb on it. If it's kind of like large in value, so it could be possible that where somebody could actually easily climb on it. So this is something that we are considered. So there is one time called as PIDAS kind of fencing. PIDAS kind of fencing is a fence in which there are some detections and sensors that are mounted on those fences, right? These fencing wires. If somebody tries to break in, or if somebody tries to climb onto the system, the alarm is generated. Since it's sensed by the sensors on mentioned onto these on those fences, and this alarm is go it goes to. All right, so this alarm actually goes to this response team, and the response team actually finds out that well something is going on, and then they respond for the. So gates now, gates have different capabilities and types. As I told you that when you're trying to plan a lock, you should also consider the surrounding environment, which is the walls, the mesh, the fences, and also the gates as well. So there are different categories and classes of gates, like class 1 gate, class 2 gate, and class 3 gates. Class 1 gates are for residential purposes, 2 gates are for general public access, like commercial grade access. Class 3 gates are industrial gates, and class 4 are for restricted areas like prisons. There's a wall stuff. We should also be considered about that walls are also made up of proper material that could not be easily blown out with explosive material in case if you're talking tough security. Bollard is another thing that's being used at places which is outside the facility at times, or maybe sometime near the buildings, and these kind of what you can say the barriers kind of things, and they are actually mentioned there to they are there to actually stop the movement of traffic, a movement of cars or vehicles directly inside the building. So they are actually there to actually stop the vehicles traffic to actually like accidentally or correctly they actually get inside the building along with the car. All right, so lightning is another part which is used in physical security. Multiple motivations. It could be used as a response mechanism. It could be used as a deterrence mechanism. But in generally, it's part of a deterrence mechanism. The multiple kinds of lights are being utilized. Some are glare protection lights. These are the lights which are pointed towards the direction of the intruders or towards the direction of the arriving people, so that we should identify the individual clearly. There is continuously lighting, which is used, which actually represents an even amount of illumination to actually make sure that everything is visible in the surrounding environment. Uh, we can use standby lighting. It gives us kind of an auto turn on of uh, kind of like perception, and this perception is used at places like, say for example, you have to leave the place for a longer period of time. So what you can do is you can use standby lighting over there, such that this light will be turned off at a given period of time, and then it will be turned on after a few hours or few minutes. So it will give the outsiders a perception like somebody is inside the facility. Facility is not empty. Somebody is inside the facility, so they would not decide breaking into the facility. Responsive lighting is like the lighting which actually, as an name already depicts, it's a lighting which turns on when the intruder is being detected. It could result in some false positives at times, but it's like it's like more being used with some additional controls. Like compensatory controls are being aligned with it, like CCTV controls, cameras are being aligned to it, so that we can ensure that the intrusion is genuine. So we can do visual monitoring to do some surveillance, and that's achieved by CCTV cameras. So to properly use this feature, there are some rules that are to be defined and followed before carrying out the CCTV based activity and CCTV based deployments inside your organization. First thing is that you should need to clarify about what's the purpose of the CCTV cameras. Like, do you want to detect some kind of access, or you want to identify intruders? Um, it could be on the basis of like it could be basis of the environment as well, like what kind of environment you're trying to monitor. It's inside, like indoor environment, it's an outdoor environment, because the cameras are of different types for those different kinds of environments. Field of view is another given thing to be considered, which defines like are you have a small or large field of view. And again, integration is another part that we consider, like, do you want to use it as a standalone monitoring system, or you want to integrate with some response team or idea systems as well. So these cameras have different setups, but generally they have uh, four different parts that they are made up of. Cameras, the main element, multiplexer. That's the uh, that's kind of a device that um, concentrate all the cameras on one device. So it kind of like give you a capability of producing a single uh, stream to the monitor. And then there is a recording system that has some storage devices plugged into it that will do the recording for the system. And then there's a monitor system. Most of the time, this monitor system has some kind of enunciator aligned with it, and that gives this enunciator is kind of like maybe kind of a big bright light bulb, or it could be in the form of some buzzer alarm. Like sometimes these monitoring guys, they do keep on monitoring stuff and they fall asleep. They don't know because nothing happens, and they just feel like, well, it's natural that, well, people just lost deep, like they just they lose sight of it, and they just something bad happens. So sometimes if some activity is being happen observed by the camera, they could even alert you through some kind of a bright light or some kind of an alarm. This is called as an enunciator. So there are some attacks that are being uh, observed in these camera systems. That's the most famous is the replay attack, in which you actually capture the recording, and then you replay it onto the same camera. And somebody would say that, well, nothing is being happening, and this recording is being played again and again and again and again, and nobody knows about it. So the prevention for this kind of attack is that we use, well, these camera vendors are now using time stamping. Well, if you are using low quality camera, you won't have this feature. But nowadays, you can see that most of these camera manufacturing organizations, these are using the use of time stamping on their cameras. But again, it would be avoidable in times of, like, if you can record the whole 24-hour stream, and then maybe it depends, like if you are time stamping it, the day, the week, the year, the time. So maybe in that case it could be a little bit uh, kind of like uh, unavoidable, like breakable, but it's like, people could observe it. But if it's like one day, or it's just a half hour, you won't observe it, like something is happening, because the time stamping would be there. But who knows, like, if like nobody knows that, uh, who observes it. Like if you come onto the duty and you find out that, well, the timestamp is the same as the time on my hand clock, and then you do this after every 1 hour, and then after the next hour, and do this after the next hour. So it's kind of like, well, it depends like how conscious you are in this stuff. But well, it can be done, like somebody can break it. So cameras have different features. Like the lens feature has this focal length part, which defines the type of view that you want to cover. Like the short focal length will cover like lot of area, or if you have longer, it will cover like objects which are far away. It would be with more detail. Zooming is another feature which is used with it, like optical zooming, and some, you can say, digital zooming and optical zooming. Digital zooming, which is happens after the capture of image, and optical zooming, which happens when before taking the image. Um, then we have what's called as this, their makeup or their movement, which is like, are they fixed cameras or they are PTZ based cameras. So these are some kind of like things that we need to consider while deploying the CCTV system inside our organization. Next is IDS systems. We discussed IDS systems in domain 5, identity and access management, and these were like network-based IDS, host-based IDS, anomalous detection and absence, signature-based IDS, protocol anomaly detection IDS. They were all logical IDS solutions. So there are some physical IDS solutions as well. Like there are some sensors which are used to find out some anomalous activity, and if they happen to find these anomalous activities, they will alert the response team on it. There are different types of it. You just have to, it's very difficult to remember all of them, but at least I'm going through it so that if you happen to actually remember any one of them. So there is electromechanical kind of idea system that detects, like if the door is open or if it's closed, and it's make use of this electrical magnetic system. It's mostly used in hotels and big malls. You might have already observed that system already mounted on the top of the door. It's easily viewable and easily to find out. Well, it's easily breakable as well. But it works on the basis of electricity, and these doors are mostly these locks are mostly configured with fail open functionality, and that's being the reason that, well, if something gets wrong with the lock, the lock should fail open. So what fail open means is that when the lock is off, the door will be opened. So this way, what we can use this feature to break the locks by just turning off the power line to this electromagnetic system. If you cut the wire to the electromagnetic system, the door will be open. So it's pretty easy to break. But it again, like if you do the fail close or fail secure system onto the electromagnetical systems, it could be very tough for the security team to actually monitor and have these maintenance capabilities performed every other day when the lock just runs out of power, or maybe it kind of like have some malfunctioning capability. So again, depends. If you are using it for secure facility, you configure it with field secure functionality enabled. If you are using it with in a public places, you should uh, use it with fail open capability. Photoelectric systems. Photoelectric systems, they actually they observe the change in light beam, uh, and there is kind of a laser system kind of thing which is kind of being seen, like if they say that where the light is dim or if it's very bright. So based on that, it kind of finds out that well some kind of intrusion activity is happening or not. Passive infrared information systems, they actually monitor the heat waves and detect if people or some kind of activity or some kind of tools are being used at places. Mostly they are engraved on walls, and that's because to find out some vibrations. Like say for example, somebody is on the other side of the room, and he is trying to drill inside the wall. So maybe this kind of activity could be detected with this infrared, this passive systems. Acoustical detection systems. Acoustic detection systems. These are use some microphones to detect change in volume of voices. Wave pattern ocean detection systems, they send microwaves at very low frequency, and they are used in large rooms, very high facility security locations. Maybe you might have seen this in many movies, in very secure locations where there is crown jewel and that's being guarded by hundreds of guards, and then there is this vibration sensors and wave protection systems that are being mounted on it. And whenever something changes or somebody tries to touch this crown jewel, so alarms triggers. Proximity detectors or capacitance detectors, these are electromagnetic field detectors. Um, and then we have electrostatic ID systems that create an electrostatic magnetic field. And when somebody moves from or moves inside that field and leaves the field, so there is a change in field. So once there is a change in field, they see that well something has happened, and then they inform on it. There could be a lot of false positives on it. Well, I agree on that. But as I already mentioned, like CCTV cameras are being mounted along with these kind of detection systems to make sure that something is malicious activity or it's genuine malicious activity to concentrate on. Another, all right. So now switching gears to some other processes that are practiced inside the organization, and that's change control processes. Uh, Change control processes are not only being followed inside the operation security department; they are also followed in the software development life cycles as well. And this process states that uh, changes that are made inside the uh, organization's business process environment, they should be properly being approved. They should be properly being documented, tested, and then they should be rolled out inside the production environment. So there is a set process for that, and that process states that you have to request for the change first. Once the change has been approved, then you have to document the change. And once that change has been properly documented and presented to the intended audience, it should be tested, then implemented, rolled out, and then you can report the change has been made successfully inside the environment. So this should be regularly followed, and the reason being is that we want to avoid unauthorized changes inside the organization business processes or operational processes. And it's been observed that many kinds of these incidents or these disruptions that happened inside the organization, they come from these unauthorized changes as well. So monitoring of these change processes, these changes that are happening inside the organization, that should be closely scrutinized, so that anything that kind of relates to the unauthorized changes, they come up and they can easily just fix this up in coming incidents or coming planning process, so that you can avoid the incidents uh, uh, if they happen because of these kind of unauthorized changes. Important thing is you should know this process by heart. Like you should remember this process should be remembered as much as you can. They like the processes I have mentioned. I always mention like which are the processes that you have to remember by heart. So this is one of them which you will have to remember. All right. So I guess after this slide we should take a break. Let me check if I can. Yeah, maybe we can take a break from here onwards. If you guys have any questions, let me know and can answer you, or maybe you can take a 10 minutes break from here onwards. All right, we are taking 10 minutes break from here. We'll come back at it's 4 or 6 over here. So maybe we'll come back on 4:15.